The man woke up before the sun, as he always did. His small apartment was quiet, except for the soft breathing of his child in the next room. He lay still for a moment, staring at the ceiling, letting the day settle in his chest. Mornings were the hardest, not because of work or money, but because the silence reminded him of everything that was gone. He moved slowly, so he would not wake the child. Years of military habits still guided his steps. Shoe lined up, bed made tight. No wasted motion. The world outside had changed, but his body had not forgotten discipline. In the kitchen, he brewed cheap coffee and drank it standing up. The taste was bitter, but it helped. On the small table sat a folded paper from the school, reminding him of a parent meeting next week. He sighed, knowing he would find a way to be there, just like he always did. He wasn't always like this. There was a time when people saluted him, trusted him with responsibility, and spoke his name with respect. Back then, his days were filled with orders, plans, and missions that mattered to many lives. Now his biggest mission was making sure his child had breakfast and clean clothes. He gently opened the bedroom door and watched his child sleep. The blanket rose and fell in a slow rhythm. That simple sight grounded him more than any medal ever had. He whispered that everything would be okay, even though he wasn't sure who he was saying it for. After dropping the child at school, he walked instead of taking the bus. It saved money, and the movement helped clear his thoughts. The city was waking up. Shops opening. Cars rushing. People complaining about small problems. He blended into the crowd, unnoticed, just another tired man with worn shoes and a faded jacket. Tucked under his arm was a thin folder holding old sheet music. The edges were bent, and some pages had notes scribbled in pencil. Music was the one thing he kept from his past that didn't hurt. It didn't ask questions. It didn't judge. It just listened. When his service ended, not by his choice, everything fell apart fast. Friends stopped calling. Promises faded. Pride turned into silence. He never talked about it, not even to his child. He learned early that explaining pain often made people uncomfortable. He reached the community center just as it opened. The building was old, but warm. It smelled like cleaning soap and old wood. Inside, volunteers moved chairs and set up tables for the day's activities. No one asked him why he was there. Some recognized him. Some didn't. That was fine. At the far end of the room stood the piano. It wasn't new, but it was cared for. The keys were slightly yellow, and a few made a soft clicking sound when pressed. Still, it worked. That was enough. He sat down and placed his hands on the keys, but didn't play yet. He took a deep breath. Music had a way of opening doors in his mind that he usually kept locked. Sometimes memories slipped through. Sometimes tears followed. But he kept coming back. When he finally began to play, the sound was gentle. Slow notes filled the room, not loud enough to demand attention, but steady enough to be noticed. A few people paused in their work. Someone smiled. Another person sat down quietly. He closed his eyes as he played. The music wasn't perfect, but it was honest. Each note carried pieces of his lifelong nights, heavy decisions, moments of fear, moments of love. His fingers moved on their own, guided by years of practice and muscle memory. That was when he sensed someone nearby. He opened his eyes and saw a young girl standing a few steps away. She held a white cane in one hand. Her other hand rested against the wall, as if she was unsure where to go next. Her head was slightly tilted toward the piano. She wasn't smiling or frowning. She was listening. He stopped playing for a moment, unsure if he should speak. Before he could decide, she took a small step closer. "Is that a piano?" she asked softly. He nodded, then remembered she couldn't see. "Yes," he said. His voice sounded rough, like it hadn't been used much that day. "It sounds different," she said. "Not like the recordings." He wasn't sure how to respond. "Different how?" "It feels warmer," she replied. Something tightened in his chest. He gestured to the bench beside him. "You can sit here if you want." She hesitated, then carefully moved closer, tapping the floor lightly with her cane until she reached the bench. She sat down slowly, keeping her hands folded in her lap. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The noise of the room faded, leaving just the quiet hum of the building. He started playing again, softer than before. The girl leaned slightly toward the piano, her face calm, as if the music was painting pictures only she could see. He noticed how still she was, how every sound seemed to matter. It reminded him of soldiers listening in the dark, trusting their senses when sight failed them. After a while, she spoke again. "Did you learn this a long time ago?" "Yes," he answered. "A very long time ago. Do you still play a lot?" "Only when I can." She nodded, as if that answer made sense to her. The music continued, filling the space between them. People passed by, but no one interrupted. Something about the moment felt fragile, like it could break if disturbed. For the first time in years, he felt truly present, not thinking about bills or mistakes or the weight of his past. Just the sound of the piano and the quiet company beside him. When the song ended, he let the final note fade naturally. The girl didn't clap. She didn't speak right away. She simply breathed out, slow and steady. "That was nice," she said. He smiled, though she couldn't see it. And for the first time that morning, the smile reached his eyes. Neither of them knew that this simple meeting would change everything. But as he placed his hands back on the keys, a feeling settled over him, something close to hope, something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in a very long time. The next time he returned to the community center, the same girl was there again. She moved confidently now, tapping her cane lightly, but there was a gentleness in her movements that suggested she was careful not to disturb anything. He smiled quietly when he saw her. She greeted him softly. "Are you here to play again?" He nodded. "If you want to listen or join, you can." She hesitated for a moment, then carefully walked to the piano and placed her hands near the keys. The man noticed that her fingers trembled slightly, not from fear, but from trying to feel each note before pressing it. He started the melody slowly, letting the music flow like a stream over smooth stones. She followed cautiously at first, pressing keys gently, almost shyly. The sound wasn't perfect, but it carried a strange harmony that made him pause and listen. There was honesty in it, something raw and beautiful. "You play differently," she said after a pause. "Your music, it feels alive." He looked at her hands, her fingers moving uncertainly. "Music doesn't have to be perfect," he said. "It just needs to be honest. Feeling counts more than skill." She nodded, her head tilting slightly, as if she understood something beyond words. Then, cautiously, she pressed another key, and the sound blended with his playing. A melody began to form, not rehearsed, not planned, but alive in that quiet room. Time passed unnoticed. Volunteers came and went. Chairs scraped across the floor. Doors opened and closed. But inside that corner with the piano, it felt as if the world had paused. The music wove between them, connecting something that neither had expected. She spoke softly, almost to herself. "I never thought I could play like this with someone else. I thought music was lonely for people like me." He glanced at her, and for a moment, he saw more than a blind girl. He saw someone reaching, someone brave in a world that could feel isolating. "Music isn't lonely unless you make it so," he said. "You have to trust the sound and the person beside you." She hesitated, then smiled faintly. He noticed her lips curved upward in a way that reached her eyes, even if he couldn't see them fully. That small smile changed something in the room, Like the air had grown warmer, their melodies became more confident, intertwining in ways that weren't planned. He would play a note, and she would respond with her own. Sometimes her timing was off, sometimes his. Yet the errors didn't ruin the music. They added character, texture, life. It was messy, but it was theirs. "You make it feel easy," she said quietly. "Like it's supposed to happen." He shook his head slightly. "It's not easy, but it's worth it. Every note is worth it." She stayed close, leaning slightly toward the piano, letting her fingers feel the vibrations of the keys as he played. He noticed how she listened carefully, head tilting, almost leaning into the sound, as if it could guide her through the world. The man thought about his past again, as he always did when he played. About the places he had been, the missions, the responsibilities, and the people he couldn't save. Music had always been there to carry him through, a quiet friend when voices of judgment were loud. Now, sitting beside this girl, he realized he was passing that gift along, quietly, without even trying. After a while, she paused, hands hovering above the keys. "I never thought someone would. Just play with me? Not just teach, but play. It feels different." He looked at her and smiled. "Because it is different, you're different." She giggled softly, a sound that seemed rare and precious. "Different doesn't always feel good," she said. He shook his head. "Different is good. It's honest. And honesty is what makes music live." The conversation faded as they played again. The notes wrapped around the room, around each other, around something deeper that neither of them fully understood yet. People who passed by paused, listening without realizing how moved they were. As they played, the man noticed how her fingers grew more confident, pressing keys with intention. She was learning not just the music, but the rhythm of connection, the unspoken language of harmony that happens when two people trust each other enough to make mistakes and still continue. He thought about the world, outside the crowded streets, the noise, the struggles, and for a few precious minutes, none of it mattered. Here, in this room with this girl, there was understanding without words. Music was their language. She suddenly stopped and rested her hands on the piano. Do you think it's possible to feel brave like this all the time?" He considered her question carefully. "No," he said slowly. "Bravery comes in moments. And moments come when you least expect them. Music. Music helps you find those moments, even when the world is hard." She smiled, softly, and placed her hands back on the keys. "Then I'll keep playing. I want more moments." He nodded, touched by her determination. "Good. Keep them. Hold them close. They'll help you when nothing else will." They played for what felt like hours, but in reality, it was probably closer to 30 minutes. When they finally stopped, there was silence, a silence that wasn't empty, but full of everything they had shared. The girl moved slightly, tilting her head toward him. "Thank you," she whispered. He smiled. "You don't have to thank me. Music doesn't need thanks. It needs listeners." Her fingers lingered on the keys, feeling their shape and texture. He noticed how carefully she moved, as if memorizing not just the sound, but the story of the piano itself. He realized then that this connection, this bond through music, was teaching him as much as he was teaching her. When it was time to leave, he walked her carefully to the exit, letting her feel the walls and the furniture with her hands. Outside, the city noise hit them again, but she seemed steadier now, more confident. He watched her disappear down the street, cane tapping in rhythm with the world. He stayed behind a moment, hands resting on the piano. He didn't know what the next day would bring, or if she would return. But he knew one thing. Something had shifted. Something had opened that had been closed for a long time. It wasn't just the girl who had gained courage. He had too. The room was quiet again, volunteers moving around him, unaware of the private world that had existed at the piano. He packed up his sheet music slowly, savoring the feeling that hadn't been there in years, the feeling of sharing, of connecting, of being seen without judgment. As he left the building, he thought about the small victories, the quiet moments that matter more than recognition or applause. He thought about how life, like music, could be unpredictable and messy, yet beautiful when you let it flow. He walked home slowly, carrying the memory of the girl's hands on the keys, her voice soft and earnest, and the sense that something new had begun. The world outside was still loud, still demanding, still difficult. But inside him, a new melody had started, one he hadn't known he needed, and he knew he would follow it wherever it led. The following week, he returned to the community center with the same sheet music tucked under his arm. The morning sunlight streamed through the tall windows, catching dust in golden beams. He spotted her immediately. She was already at the piano, fingers hovering above the keys, as if she had been waiting just for him. "Good morning," he said quietly. She smiled softly. "I was hoping you would come today." He nodded, taking the seat beside her. They didn't speak for a few moments, letting the silence fill with possibility. Then he started playing, a slow tune with small crescendos that mirrored the rhythm of breathing. This time, she joined him more confidently. Her hands moved with awareness, and she responded to his notes almost instinctively. He noticed how her fingers sometimes lingered on a key, feeling the vibrations as much as hearing the sound. It was subtle, but he could tell she was learning more than just the melody. She was learning to trust her own instincts. "Do you remember this one?" he asked softly, nodding toward a familiar piece in the folder. "Yes," she said. "It's the one you played the first day. But I think I can do more now." He smiled, impressed. The girl's progress wasn't just technical, it was emotional. She was discovering her own voice within the music, a voice that was growing stronger each day. As the room filled with sound, he noticed the familiar tightness in his chest, the one that appeared when memories of the military came uninvited. He tried to push it aside, but the notes they were creating together brought back flashes of his past. Long nights in foreign lands, quiet conversations intense, the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. The girl's presence grounded him. She played with trust, not judgment. Her hands followed his in harmony, yet there was an independence in her rhythm that made the music richer. It was as if they were weaving their stories together, each note a word in a conversation neither of them had spoken aloud. For a moment, he let himself drift into a memory from years ago. He remembered a mission where decisions had to be made in seconds, where lives depended on actions he could not postpone. The memory carried guilt and sorrow, but also resilience. Music, strangely enough, carried him through that time too. Now, playing with the girl, he felt a thread connecting the man he once was with the man he was becoming. "Why do you keep coming here?" she asked suddenly, breaking the quiet. "Even when it's hard." He paused, thinking about how to answer honestly without scaring her with his own struggles. "Because this is a place where music and people meet," he said finally. "And sometimes you need a place like that to remind you that life can still be beautiful, even when it's hard." She nodded slowly, letting his words sink in. Then she played a note, a simple sound, but filled with intention. He responded, and the dialogue of the piano continued. Time passed differently in those moments. The world outside the center was loud and complicated, but inside there was only music and understanding. He found himself smiling more freely, laughing softly at a note she played off key, but with confidence. She giggled too, the sound light and genuine. As the music continued, he began to notice something in her style, a confidence emerging, not forced, but earned. It reminded him of the young soldiers he once trained, learning to trust themselves under pressure. Here, she was his pupil and his equal at the same time. After a while, they paused, leaning back on the bench. The girl's fingers hovered above the keys, still feeling their shape, still listening for echoes. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked, curiosity clear in her tone. He nodded. "Sometimes. Not just the music, but the purpose, the sense that every day mattered." She seemed to understand in a way children often do, without judgment. "I think every note we play here matters," she said. Her words struck him more than he expected. They were simple, innocent, but filled with insight. In that moment, he realized she had taught him something. That value doesn't only come from grand achievements or recognition. It comes from small connections, small acts, moments that touch hearts. He began playing again, letting the melody flow with a subtle shift, infusing it with memories he hadn't spoken of. She followed him naturally, and for the first time, he allowed himself to feel that maybe he could belong somewhere again. Even in small ways, the door to the center opened unexpectedly, and a man in a crisp uniform entered. He walked with a presence that immediately commanded attention. The man froze slightly, recognizing the insignia. It had been years since he had seen a face like that in person. The girl did not react immediately, but he noticed a subtle tension in the room. People paused in their movements, sensing something important had entered. The veteran continued playing, fingers moving over the keys, but the melody was different, now slightly tense, slightly uncertain. The man in uniform stopped at the doorway, eyes fixed on the piano. He recognized the veteran instantly, and for a moment the room seemed to hold its breath. The general's face was unreadable, but the pause spoke volumes. The girl sensed the shift. Her hands froze mid-air, as if she could feel the tension as clearly as sound. The music had stopped, replaced by something heavier, something charged with the weight of the past. The veteran's mind raced. Memories he had carefully tucked away surfaced all at once. Orders given, missions executed, choices that haunted him. The presence of the general was a reminder of the life he had left behind, the life he had been forced out of, the recognition he had never received. He looked at the girl briefly. Her eyes were calm, trusting. That simple trust steadied him more than anything else in the room. The general took a few slow steps forward, still silent. Every movement seemed deliberate, measured. The air was thick with unspoken words and long-held tension. The room itself felt smaller, as if the walls were leaning in, holding their breath along with everyone inside. The veteran continued to sit, hands resting lightly on the piano. He didn't move to stand. He didn't know if he should. He had learned long ago that appearances could dictate the outcome of a situation. But this moment wasn't about appearances. It was about truth. The girl leaned slightly closer to him, unaware of the magnitude of the moment. Yet her presence reminded him of grounding, of the importance of being present, of the power of human connection. The general finally stopped, less than a few feet away, and held the gaze of the veteran. Neither spoke, yet the silence was louder than any words could be. It was a test, a recognition, a weighing of years and actions that had already passed, but still mattered. For the first time in a long while, the veteran felt the full weight of his past, of choices made and consequences endured. But alongside that weight was a small spark of hope. He had not been alone in this journey, even if it had sometimes felt that way. Music had been his companion, and this girl, in her innocence and trust, had reminded him that connection still mattered. The general finally spoke, his voice low and deliberate. The words weren't accusatory, nor overly formal. They were measured, full of meaning, leaving space for understanding to grow. The room remained silent, waiting, listening, absorbing every nuanced dot in that moment. Everything hung in balance, the past and the present, fear and courage, recognition and humility. The veteran felt his heart pound, but he remained seated, hands still resting on the keys, ready for whatever would come next, knowing that this encounter could change everything in ways he had not expected. And the girl, still beside him, felt the tension too, though she didn't know why. She simply stayed, hands near the keys, ready to play again, to be part of something larger than herself, part of a story that was unfolding in real time, with notes and silence, trust and recognition, hope and fear all intertwined. The general's gaze stayed fixed on the man at the piano, steady and unblinking. The room felt frozen, every volunteer and visitor sensing the weight in the air, though none fully understood why. The blind girl's hands hovered just above the keys, sensing the tension through vibrations more than sound. Her small fingers trembled slightly, but she stayed seated, trusting the rhythm of the moment. The veteran felt every second stretch. Memories he had buried for years resurfaced, along with feelings of pride, fear, regret, and hope. He knew recognition from this man had never come easy, yet now it stood right before him. The general's presence alone reminded him of both what he had lost and what he had endured. Finally, the general took a slow, deliberate step forward. The polished shoes tapped against the wooden floor with authority, each step echoing through the still room. He stopped beside the piano, silent, and studied the veteran, looking past the face to the man he had once known in uniform. There was a pause, a heavy inhalation of the past meeting the present. "You've carried a lot," the general said softly, almost a whisper, yet it carried through the room. "More than I ever imagined." The veteran's fingers clenched slightly on the piano keys. He didn't respond immediately, unsure if words would do justice to the years of silence, the weight of sacrifice, and the moments of quiet despair he had survived. Instead, he simply nodded, letting the music still lingering in the air speak for him. The blind girl, sensing the shift, leaned slightly forward, listening to the vibrations beneath her hands. She didn't know the significance of the uniformed man, but she felt the seriousness in the air, the tension that made the piano seem heavier, as if the room itself held its breath. The general's eyes softened slightly. "I should have said it before," he continued. "I should have acknowledged your service, your choices. You carried burdens no one should have to carry alone." The veteran felt a lump form in his throat. No medals or letters could have filled the silence, but these words, simple, honest, human, moved him in ways he had long forgotten were possible. He swallowed hard, trying to steady his voice. "I did what I could," he said finally. "I did what I had to do. I never asked for recognition." The general shook his head slowly, a faint smile breaking through the stern exterior. "Recognition doesn't erase the years, the pain, or the sacrifice," he said. "But it matters that you hear it now. It matters that the truth is known." The blind girl reached out, placing her hand gently on the piano. Though she couldn't see the faces before her, she felt the emotions emanating from both men. Music had brought her here, to this moment, connecting them in ways words could not. The veteran began to play again, softly, letting his fingers move over the keys as if testing the air, the room, and the presence of the general. The melody was slower this time, more contemplative, carrying the weight of years spent in service and solitude. The girl joined him cautiously, letting her own hands respond to his notes. Together, the piano became a bridge between past regrets and present acknowledgement. The general watched silently, letting the music wash over him. He wasn't an intruder in this moment. He was a witness, a participant in the unspoken reconciliation taking place in a corner of the room. Every note struck by the veteran and the girl resonated with honesty, with humanity, and with the quiet understanding that some connections transcend words. "Music carries truth," the general said softly. "It speaks what words cannot. It's why we listen. And today, I hear your truth." The veteran's chest tightened, and a tear slipped unnoticed down his cheek. For years, he had been trained to conceal emotion, to mask weakness, to prioritize duty over feeling. But here, in this room, with the girl beside him and the general acknowledging him, he allowed himself to feel fully relief, validation, and a kind of peace he hadn't experienced in years. The girl's hands pressed more firmly on the keys, responding instinctively to the shift in the atmosphere. Her music was gentle but persistent, a counterpoint to the veteran's deeper, heavier notes. The harmony that emerged was fragile yet beautiful, a reflection of the trust and courage forming among the three of them. The general took a small step closer, lowering his voice further. "You were never alone," he said, "even when it felt like it. I should have recognized it sooner. I failed in many ways, but it's not too late to honor the courage you carried." The veteran paused, hands hovering above the keys. His eyes met the general's. For the first time in decades, he felt fully seen, not just as a soldier or a veteran, but as a man who had endured, sacrificed, and continued to care despite hardship. He nodded slowly, letting the acknowledgment settle in. The girl sensed the subtle shift and smiled faintly. She didn't speak, but her hands danced lightly over the keys, adding a brightness to the music that softened the heavy emotions filling the room. Her trust in the veteran had become an anchor, and through their shared melody, she now anchored the general's understanding as well. For several minutes, none of them spoke. The music was enough, a conversation more honest than words alone could manage. Notes rose and fell, carrying both sorrow and hope. It was a dialogue of life, sacrifice, and connection, unfolding in real time. Finally, the general broke the silence, his tone steadier, infused with a quiet respect. "Your strength has always been remarkable," he said, "and now I see it fully. Thank you for everything you've done, and for the courage you continue to show." The veteran nodded again, voice finally finding its way. "Thank you for seeing it now. That matters more than anything else." The girl's hands lingered on the keys, feeling the vibrations, sensing the peace settling in the room. She didn't need to understand the years of history between the two men. She only needed to know that her music had helped carry them here, to a moment of honesty and connection. The general's expression softened further. He looked at the girl and then back at the veteran. "I see now," he said simply. "I see the impact you've had, not just in service, but in life, in moments that really matter." The veteran exhaled slowly, a weight lifting from his shoulders. For years, he had carried recognition like a silent burden. And while no medal could undo the past, this acknowledgement, this human understanding, felt like a balm to old wounds. The girl pressed a final key gently, letting the note linger in the air. The room seemed to breathe along with it, carrying a collective sense of release. Music had created a bridge between past and present, between pain and healing, between silence and understanding. The veteran closed his eyes for a moment, letting the music end naturally. He felt lighter, steadier, and strangely hopeful. The general nodded, a gesture of respect, and for a brief moment, the world outside seemed far away, less harsh, less judgmental. The girl leaned back slightly, hands resting lightly on the piano. She felt a new confidence, a subtle recognition of her own power to connect, to influence, to heal. Music had given her a role in something larger than herself, and she savored the feeling. The veteran finally stood, stretching slightly. The general remained silent, but the respect in his stance spoke volumes. They didn't need more words. The music and the shared presence had said everything that mattered. The girl reached up, rushing her fingers across the piano one last time before stepping back. She smiled at the veteran, an expression full of trust and gratitude. "I'll practice more," she said softly. He nodded, smiling in return. "And I'll be here." The general stepped back toward the door, his presence less imposing now, softened by the moment of acknowledgement and shared humanity. "Take care," he said simply, leaving the room with quiet dignity, as the door closed behind him. The veteran felt a sense of closure settle over him. The past had been heavy, but it no longer controlled him. Music, connection, and honesty had created a space for healing, not just for him, but for the girl and even for the general. He looked at her, a silent promise passing between them. They had begun something that they trust. Friendship, understanding, and it would continue. Note by note, step by step, through the quiet power of shared music and human connection. The day after the encounter with the general, the veteran returned to the community center with a lighter step than usual. The sun was warm through the windows, casting a gentle glow on the worn wooden floors. The girl was already there, her hands resting on the piano keys, as if greeting him before words could. "Good morning," she said softly. "Good morning," he replied, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. For the first time in years, he felt truly at ease entering the room. The weight of yesterday's acknowledgement had settled into something comforting, like a calm tide. He sat beside her, hands hovering over the keys. They began to play together immediately, the notes flowing easily, more naturally than ever. The music was lighter, brighter, filled with a sense of hope. Their bond had strengthened, and it showed in the harmony between them. Each note carried trust, each pause carried understanding. "You sound happy today," the girl said, her fingers moving confidently across the piano. "I am," he admitted. Yesterday changed things. It reminded me that courage and sacrifice are seen, even if we don't always notice it ourselves." She nodded, letting the music continue to speak. Her presence was steady, grounding him, just as his playing had steadied her before. The rhythm they shared was no longer tentative. It was a conversation that needed no words. As they played, he thought about the general and the way their brief exchange had shifted everything. The recognition he had longed for, not in medals or accolades, but in simple acknowledgement, had finally arrived. It reminded him that even years of silence and sacrifice could be honored, and that healing often came in unexpected ways. The girl leaned closer, letting her hands feel the vibrations of the piano while listening intently. "I think music is magic," she said quietly. "It helps people understand things without needing words." He smiled. "You're right. It can connect people, even in ways that seem impossible." They played for what felt like hours, though the clock showed only a short passage of time. Notes rose and fell, creating a tapestry of sound that filled the room with warmth. Occasionally, he would glance at her hands and see the confidence that had grown since their first encounter. Each day, she was learning not only music, but trust, patience, and resilience. The community center volunteers passed by, some pausing to listen, others moving quietly to avoid disturbing the magic of the moment. No one needed to interfere. The music itself demanded attention and respect. It was alive with emotion, raw yet gentle, teaching everyone present something about humanity, connection, and hope. After a while, they stopped playing, letting the final note linger in the air. The room was still, but it felt full of emotion, understanding, and shared experience. The girl's hands rested lightly on the keys, and she smiled at him. "Thank you for teaching me," she said softly. "But mostly, thank you for playing with me." He shook his head. "No, thank you. You've reminded me why music matters, and why connection matters. We've helped each other more than you know." She tilted her head thoughtfully. "Do you think we could keep doing this? Every week?" He nodded. "Yes, every week. And who knows? Maybe we'll even try new songs, new melodies, things we've never played before." The simplicity of that promise brought a rare lightness to his heart. For so long, life had been weighed down with responsibility, loss, and the echoes of the past. Now, there was a sense of possibility, a reminder that even in ordinary places, extraordinary connections could form. As they packed up their sheet music and prepared to leave, the veteran felt a sense of completion that had eluded him for years. The acknowledgement from the general, the trust of the girl, and the act of playing music together had created a circle of understanding and healing that extended beyond words. Outside, the sun was higher in the sky, warming the street and the quiet city sounds. The girl moved with confidence, tapping her cane rhythmically, smiling as they walked. He walked beside her, not as a teacher, not as a parent, but as someone sharing a journey, a partnership in small but significant steps. He reflected on the past, the battles, the losses, the quiet moments of despair, and realized that healing did not erase them, nor did acknowledgement erase the weight of what he had endured. But recognition, connection, and trust had the power to transform those burdens into something meaningful. Music had become the bridge linking past and present, pain and hope, teacher and student, veteran and child. Over time, the routine of visiting the piano became a sanctuary for both of them. Each week, they explored new melodies, challenged themselves with more difficult pieces, and learned from each other's strengths and weaknesses. Music became more than practice. It became a shared language, a way of communicating that went beyond sight, beyond expectation, beyond fear. The veteran noticed changes in himself as well. Patience, long buried under years of responsibility and self-imposed isolation, began to return. Laughter, once rare and carefully measured, came more easily. He found himself thinking about the future differently, not just surviving, but living, appreciating, and investing in small, meaningful moments. The girl, in turn, thrived. Her confidence grew, and her approach to music became more intuitive. She discovered that mistakes were part of the process, that imperfection could be beautiful, and that trust in herself and others was the key to connecting deeply. Together, they were not just playing music. They were shaping each other's worlds in subtle, powerful ways. One afternoon, after a particularly vibrant session, the veteran paused and looked at the girl. "Do you realize what you've done?" he asked. She tilted her head, curious. "What do you mean?" "You've reminded me that life isn't just about the past, or the pain, or the things we can't change. It's about the moments we create, the people we connect with, and the music we share. You've brought joy back into my life in ways I didn't think were possible." Her fingers hovered over the keys, and she smiled softly. "I think music is supposed to do that. It's supposed to bring people together." He nodded, letting her words settle in. They had both learned, in different ways, that connection, patience, and trust could heal wounds that seemed permanent. The piano had become their bridge, their shared world, and their teacher. It had shown them that even after hardship, life could be filled with moments of beauty, understanding, and hope. As the afternoon sunlight waned, they packed up the music and walked toward the door. He felt a sense of gratitude so deep it was almost overwhelming. The blind girl had unknowingly become a guide, leading him out of years of quiet isolation, reminding him of the power of shared humanity outside. The city continued its noisy rhythm, but they carried a calm and confidence with them. Music had given them both a voice, a way to navigate life with courage, understanding, and compassion. The veteran realized that, though recognition from others could be validating, the truest acknowledgement came from human connection, an understanding glance, a shared melody, a simple act of trust. That evening, as he returned home, he paused at the door and looked back on the quiet city streets. He felt lighter, steadier, and more hopeful than he had in years. Life would always have challenges, responsibilities, and moments of hardship. But now he had discovered something enduring, the power of music, the depth of trust, and the healing force of genuine connection. And somewhere, in a corner of the community center, a young girl smiled softly, knowing she had been part of something greater than herself, shaping a life with notes, harmony, and courage. Together, they had created not just music, but a story of resilience, trust, and hope that would carry on for years to come.